What is up, everybody? We are back in Trav's garage. I've got Penelope's engine sitting behind me, back from the builder, getting resealed, but we've got to do some stuff to it before it goes back in the car. I want to show you a couple things. I don't know how much we're going to show of us actually putting it in the car. You guys have seen that quite a few times already, so let's take a look at the engine. I've got some new stuff for it before it goes in, and hopefully we'll learn a few new things along the way. So here's a quick look at Penelope's engine. Again, you can see I've got to add some of the pipes back in for the heater system, some of the connector pipes and boots, and we've got to get some wiring cleaned up again a little bit. But one of the bigger things we're going to do is actually pull the carburetors that Trav and I rebuilt off, and I've got some new carburetors for it, so we'll take a look at those side by side. I actually had some restored for the car, so we'll take a look at some restored one versus the ones Trav and I rebuilt. I've got the carburetors off of Penelope's engine. We'll take a look at the ones Trav and I rebuilt versus the ones that were rebuilt by Tim over at Volksbits.com, which I will put a link to this in the video notes. He restores carbs. He can repair carbs. I think I saw on his website he also does distributors and fuel pumps. So if you're looking for restoring your original pieces versus getting new aftermarket ones, Tim over at Volksbits is probably the way to go. Now, I actually kind of lucked out because somebody had Tim rebuild these carburetors and then decided to go a different route, which is something I was contemplating as well. I was contemplating putting on some of the 34, I don't know, the Empis or the whatever carbs on the car. Problem being, I would have lost the ability to run the stock air cleaner, which is something I really wanted to do. Now, I think some of our drivability issues we had are in part by the carburetors Trav and I rebuilt. There's a couple things we'll take a look at in comparison to the ones Tim had rebuilt. Now, this one, funny enough, when I pulled it off, you can see the throttle plate had actually come loose. So that's definitely an issue one right there, because it's going to cause vacuum leaks and all kinds of shenanigans. And you can see the throttle plate itself, we got play. So those throttle plate bushings are worn out in this carburetor, and as well as this carburetor. So I don't know how much you can see, but those throttle plate bushings are pretty common to wear out on these 32 PD SIT carburetors. Now, when I was looking at trying to do something with these further or get different ones, everyone had said, one, you got to make sure you got a match set, because oftentimes they don't end up being matched sets, which if you see the numbers here, we got a VW40-2 with, I'm guessing, the serial number or part number there. And on this one, oops, we actually have a VW41-2. So these are a matched pair, or at least the bodies are, but Trav and I had to, we pulled top plates off of other carburetors. They're kind of Frankenstein together, honestly. So, we could have gotten the throttle plates rebushed and done the best we could. But like I said, these ones popped up for me to rebuild, or that were already restored. And if you look at them, they look freaking perfect. The only thing, which Tim gave me a little discount because these were a 12 volt carburetor, mine are 6 volts. So I've got to swap over my 6 volt chokes onto these, as well as I can pull the jet and swap over the idle solenoid jet. Tim also has nice barbed, screwed in fuel inlet tubes versus the pressed in ones. If you remember, I think one of the carburetors, when we first pulled the fuel line off, it actually pulled the fitting out of the carb, which I've had a Volkswagen catch on fire for that exact thing happening. So, you know, that's something that I think as a big upgrade is those being screwed in and barbed. And I mean, they look great. There's no wiggle, there's no play, there's no craziness. So I'm going to swap over the chokes, and then we'll talk about the linkage a little bit. I came across, when I was researching everything, I came across some literature on how to set the carburetors up, what they would have done at the factory as far as the linkage lengths are concerned, and we'll kind of go from there. So we're going to do a couple things, take a look at a couple things really quick on the carbs here before they go back together. Now, if you noticed, I actually removed the jets that were in the carbs, the idle jets that were in the carbs, because we plan on using the 6-volt idle jet solenoids. But I'm going to keep these jets obviously set off to the side and pay attention to which carb they came out of, just in case we have any issues with the way it runs once we got it back together. Now, I was talking about some of the literature I found, or somebody had pointed me towards on these carburetors. It's called Look, Listen, Do It Better, and it's from Volkswagen Twin Carburetor System. It was a slide series, but it goes through, talks about the carbs, talks about the linkages, everything that you have in the carburetors. This is probably the best information I've seen on these carburetors. It also talks about the measurement of the linkage arms and some of the special tools that Volkswagen had. Now, we're right here. So these are the small linkage arms on the carburetors themselves. They didn't have a measurement in here because Volkswagen has this nice super fancy tool, which would be cool to get a hold of actually, but somebody had pulled up in their manual that it's 99 millimeter plus or minus 0.2 millimeter, or 3.89 inches plus or minus 8 thousandths of an inch. Both left and right, measured from the center of the socket. So they're both the same, measured from the center of the socket. So if you're going, here's one of the linkage pieces right there. You got the center socket, which is kind of hard to do from behind the camera to actually see because you're trying to look at both sides, obviously, but I would say that one is good to go. And this one should also be good to go. I'll double check when it's a little easier for me to get a close eye on it. The other thing we have to do is the chokes. Now, when Trav and I rebuilt the other carburetors, the specs that we saw, which I didn't have any issues, was you would put the choke in, kind of line it up at the line there, and then go about 1/8 of a turn down, and that was the amount of pressure that you would actually put on the choke. So I'm going to get those linkage bars put in, we'll get the chokes put on, we'll get the carbs on the engine, and then I think it's just about ready to go into the car. So as I'm going through the book again, we're going to go ahead and set the volume control at kind of their starting point setting, which they say you go all the way in until it's seated gently. You don't want to wrench this down because you could bend or distort everything. So there we are seated. Now this volume control wheel, you can see, has a little bit of a different shape right there. So we'll be able to kind of tell how many revolutions in direction we go. Now, according to the book, we're supposed to go 1.5 turns out to start, which I think is about right there. So I'll double check that once I'm not behind the camera, but that's going to be our starting point. And once it's in the car, once it's running, once it's heated up, the tune-up procedures are pretty interesting as far as adjusting the idle. Every time you adjust the idle, you're going to have to adjust that volume screw again just to, so there's going to be some finicky back and forth to actually get these dialed in, but I'll try and go over that a little bit when we get to that point. Well, Trev and I got the engine in the Fastback, and I won't lie to you, it fought us a little bit. Have you ever had one of those Volkswagen engines where you just can't get the angle right to get the engine in? That was us this time. Also, I'm going to flip you around and show you a couple other issues that we dealt with a little bit. So, because mine has AC, oh my gosh. Getting in here to do stuff with the carburetors, hook stuff up, get that spring hooked back up, what a pain. Also, man, I don't know how many of you Type 3 guys out there struggle getting these air bellows, air boots on. Holy cow, that thing beat us up a little bit. But she's all in. Trav ran to go get some tires for the front of the 55. So I don't know if I'm going to wait around for him or not. I might set up the tripod and see if I can actually get the car to fire up. So the carbs are completely dry, and so I don't have to crank this poor old 6-volt battery a whole bunch. I'm going to give it a couple squirts here of starter fluid. Alright, so, I'm not gonna lie, there's gonna be a lot of fiddly stuff that happens next as far as getting this running the way it should, between adjusting the idle. If you heard, it was running at a pretty high RPM for a minute there. I just backed everything off as much as I could. If you saw, I pulled the linkage off to the right side carburetor, because anything you do to the left side carburetor, you don't want it to affect the adjustments on the right side carburetor. So our Look, Listen, Do It Better book tells you to leave the left side hooked up, and I do need to pull this off and measure it to make sure I've got the correct measurement there. And then I will start with adjusting the idle, adjusting the, I went blank. I will be adjusting the idle, adjusting the volume screws. And if you adjust the volume screws, you got to go back and adjust the idle and so forth. So it is a lot of fiddly test and tune stuff. You know, that's kind of the best tips I can give you, is get that, you know, I'll put that in the links below, that Look, Listen, Do It Better, because every car is going to be different. I can't say, yeah, go ahead and turn these screws 3 screws and out, and this one 4 screws out, and whatever. It's going to be completely different on your engine compared to my engine. So Penelope actually runs pretty good, sounded good. It's going to be all of that little fiddly testing, tuning, and dialing it in. So I'm gonna get to that. Thanks for watching this Mileage Unknown. Stay tuned for more car shenanigans.